Ja, herzlich willkommen zurück im Hauptsaal. Ich freue mich sehr, nun einen Gast aus dem hohen Norden bei uns begrüßen zu dürfen, genauer gesagt aus Norwegen, dem ersten Land auf der Welt, das die Migration von FM auf DAB+ vollziehen wird, und zwar im nächsten Jahr bereits. Notre invité est Marius Lillelien, directeur de radio depuis 2009 de la chaîne de droit public norvégienne. Je n'essaye pas de prononcer ça. En anglais, c'est Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation. Bevor Marius Lillelien Radiodirektor beim NRK wurde, war er unter anderem verantwortlich für die Entwicklung der Digitalradiostrategie des Unternehmens. Wir sind sehr gespannt auf seine Ausführungen zum Thema digitale Migration in Norwegen. We are very happy to have you here. Welcome, Marius Lillelien.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. In 139 days from now, we are starting to switch off the national FM networks in Norway. 139 days. And in the next 29 minutes, I'll talk to you about how public and commercial private radio has worked together in our country to make that happen. And I'll also, of course, talk about the new possibilities in terms of content that this has given us. And this is, of course, what it's all about. I used to be a DJ a long time ago in radio, so to me, that's the new content, that's what it's all about. And I get a lot of interest now. It's very, of course, very flattering from all around Europe about this switch off. I get lots of questions, and I go to meetings like this. And a lot of good, polite questions. But under those questions, I feel there's often a sense of, and maybe some of you are asking that question inside you now, and it's this. What are those Norwegians thinking? Why switch off FM now? It's 4 years before anyone else is trying to do it. And I'll give you a short explanation as to why. This is Norway, this is my country. We have a population of 5 million. We have the longest coastline in Europe. It actually takes me longer to fly from Oslo, where I live, to the northern parts, and then to the northern parts of Norway, than to fly from Oslo to Zurich. So you can imagine we have huge distribution costs for radio. It's a difficult country to distribute radio in. And if you dig a little bit more into that, the population density per square kilometer looks like this compared to your country. And again, the population is this. So you can imagine distribution is a big issue for us. We can't have double distribution for a long period. It's simply not affordable. Okay? And in addition to that, when we started planning this, or the decision 6 years ago to go digital, we had to choose, because a lot of our FM stations, a lot of our FM antennas look like this. I guess a picture familiar to you in the winter time. It's rough conditions. So we had to choose either to upgrade, do a large maintenance upgrade of our FM networks, or to invest in digital. And if we upgraded FM, we would have no more new possibilities in terms of new stations or more frequencies. It would remain the same. Or we could go digital with all the possibilities that gave us. And as you know, we chose to go digital. So I'll take a little bit back to the short history of digital radio in Norway. We had the first DAB trials in 1991, so it's a long time ago. And then in 95, we had the first DAB-only radio station, NRK. We produced a classical music station, and in addition to that station, we started to broadcast our 3 national public service stations, and the national private radio started to broadcast in DAB as well. It's a very successful AC station. So we had by then 5 stations on DAB in Norway. And that was the start of a long and good collaboration between public and private radio in Norway regarding the digital distribution issue. So we cooperate for distribution, but of course we compete when it comes to content and listening. And then it took quite some time, as it probably did here. Up to 2005, new stations were added, and then receivers finally were available in large scale in retail at a reasonable, starting to be a reasonable price. So that was when things really started happening. And to move further along, in 2010, we decided to start a company together with the major players on the private side, the two major private players, and started a company called Digital Radio Norway, which is a joint venture. We own it together, and this was working with the distribution issue, with the marketing issue, and with the lobbying issue for the digital radio issue. And this made it possible for the government the next year to issue this white paper with a clear roadmap for digital radio, saying that in 2017 the radio will be digital in Norway if these 4 demands are met. So the first one was about the coverage. We needed to have a digital population coverage, not the territory, but the population coverage of 99.5% for our stations, all our stations, which is about the same as the best we have for FM. And it was 90% for the commercial, from the commercial side. And it's 90% because they can't make a business case out of having 99%. So 90% is what we decided on from the private sector. And the second demand is there needed to be added content value for the listeners, new stations, new services. And the third one, we needed to have at least 50% of the radio listeners using digital radio in some way, either DAB or digital TV or IP by 2015 to make the switchover happen in 2017. And this last and maybe the most difficult demand was there had to be aftermarket car solutions available. And because it's difficult, because that's the one that's more or less out of our control, because Norway is not a big country, as you can imagine, in producing cars. So that's the most difficult one to handle. Then, so we started working on this, and building networks was the first step. We have 2 national networks, one for the public sector, which I represent, one for the private, and there can be another multiplex for the privates if there's interest for it in the market. It's 953 transmitters and 765 locations, so you can imagine it's a huge distribution network. And there's also 37 local networks available, and they're starting to being filled up with the local stations now. And the next step was creating new content, because that was the second demand. Remember, we had to have new content, and that's the whole reason why we're doing that in the first place. So I did that work for our company. So the first thing I did was actually go to Switzerland, and I met with the team at SRG and heard from their experiences in moving Musikwelle from AM to DAB, which was very successful, and it was a great inspiration for us. And I did research in other markets comparable to Norway, like Denmark, like Belgium, markets at our sites working on the same issue. And we find some. And I could see there were some holes in the market, some segments that wasn't really served very well by radio. The youngest kids and the oldest listeners, for instance, we could do better. And there wasn't a lot of room for alternative music either. So there were some holes in the market that we could clearly see. And we wanted to use this to strengthen our existing stations, because in history, we had a long list of unfortunate compromises in our programs. Like, you have an AC station with news and music, and then on that station we had to have children programs, which in 2016 didn't make much sense. Or we had still have on our current affairs and culture station, we have minority language in the middle of the day, a news broadcast with minority language sort of closes the station down. So we wanted to get out of that and create own stations for those target groups, and use this to sort of to upgrade the formats of our existing stations. And then it was very important for us to use the energy within our company to create new content, because we didn't have any extra money. So I think I did more than 100 workshops with our company, sort of getting all the ideas from our company in terms of new programs, new stations, and new ideas. And it's always, when you meet people like you, there's always radio persons like, I've always wanted to, I had this idea, but I never got to do it because it wasn't right for the format. So I got all those ideas out and brought them into new stations. And of course, for us, it's not important for us as a public to increase our share. We have a very good share in the market, but it's very important for us to give more value for the license fee for the listeners. So that was the points leading up to the new stations. And if you look shortly at this, I'll explain it. This is the R stations, NRK stations since 1993, and you see the average age of the listeners. And we had 3 stations for a long time: one youth music-oriented station, one full service, we call it, regional station, which is by far the biggest station on the market, and we had the third one, which was culture and current affairs. So for a long time, those were the 3 stations we had, because that's what was possible on FM. And by 2014, it looks like this. So I'll go into all the details. No, I won't. But it's now 13 stations. So we did a children's station. We did a station called MP3, which is a very successful the station for teenagers. You know, we're the country of Kygo, so of course we did do a lot of electronic dance music. It's a sort of a rhythmic CNR station, very successful. And we did an alternative music station, and we also did a station you can see here called P1+, which is sort of inspired by Musikkveldet. Very successful station for the older segments. Has more than 5% share now, so it's on DAB only. So it's so actually we created a lot of new content. Some of it was existing already, but we upgraded it and gave it more power. So we have used this to really enhance our content and see our whole station as a multi-station strategy instead of only running 3 stations. And in the next couple of years, we did enormous amounts of marketing and promotion. We did even this campaign, might look like a strange picture to you, but we did a campaign together with the private stations and with actually almost the same slogan as I could see you have in the lobby. It's more radio in digital radio. So we show that and we broadcast that on our TV station the first time we actually, for instance, had the NRJ logo on our TV station. But we did that to show the public that there's a lot more radio for you now. And it worked. So in 2014, they had a big shift. We had by then, really in retail, when it comes to normal radio sets, kitchen radios, the sales were all DAB plus during that year. So the retail stopped selling, more or less stopped selling FM. So that was a big breakthrough in terms of sales, and then this led to an increase in the digital listening. So it looked like this. In 2011, when we started, we had 25% listening digital, and by early 2015, we had 54%, which I hear is about what you have now. So it's a quite similar situation. So you should be able to go, really. But it was a big reach, and the interesting thing, one interesting point here, I think, is that the growth was really in DAB+. I thought the growth would be bigger in IP, but it wasn't. IP also grew by, I think, 2%, but almost all of the growth in that period was from FM to DAB, DAB+. Okay, so this made it possible for the government to make the decision in early last year that we were the first country in the world to switch off FM. And they had two, the decision, excuse me, had these two conclusions. All national stations switch off during 2017. But the small local stations outside the major cities can stay, if they want, on FM till 2022. And that has to do with the local radios said they need more time to adjust to a digital market and see if they can make that work in the smallest communities. And it's a very important issue for us to keep a local radio alive in sort of a cultural and democratic sense, even though it's not a big part of the market. So that's a decision everyone is happy about now. So what's the advantage here in the end? What's the advantages? What's in it for us? Well, spectrum is almost no issue anymore. There's almost room for all the radio you can be able to create now. For us, we have 13 stations. That's a lot better than to have 3. We have a multi-station strategy. As I explained, we have clear formats now. We got rid of all those old school compromises. And it's very important when we make the switch that every station has the same distribution and then the same status as a part of our mission. And on the private side, they also do multi-station strategies, of course, and for them now it's possible to do lots of new solutions with packages and for advertisers, and they also combine local distribution with what we call semi-national, which is buying, for instance, local distribution in 60% of the country. It could be a very powerful model, and then of course national stations. And the last point, very important for the private side, no more regularity limitations. It's been a big issue in our market for the last 20 years, at least for the last 10 years, the theme of concession. You call it concession as well, I understand. So we had very successful private radio station been successful for 10 years and then losing their concession. So with DAB, that's all over. If you can pay for the distribution, you're in. That's all you need to do. Very important for the private sector. So now the daily reach early this year is 61%. Still a long way to go. I'll be honest about that. And that's about cars. And that's about the aftermarket cars. We have some really good products available on the market now, but all the new cars come with DAB+ as a standard. That's not a problem, but it's the old cars that's the challenge. And that's probably now the only big challenge remaining for the switchover. Because almost all the consumers say, I'll wait, I want to have DAB, I want to have radio in my car, but I'll wait till the last minute to get it done. So, and that's normal. I mean, you wait for the price to get lower, the technology to get better, but that's going to be a challenge when more than 1 million cars are going to be switched at almost the same time. So that, again, led to the way we run the operation now in the actual switch-off, which will start in the northern parts of the country. And we do that because especially with the cars, it's easier to handle one region at a time than if the whole country would be switched off in one big bang, right? Especially you can imagine just for having enough product available, having not enough garages available, having call centers available to explain it to people, it's easier to do it that way. So we start the 11th of January next year, and then move on to the next territory. The public service broadcasters switch off a bit before the privates in these territories. The private sector insisted that they wanted to have some more time in case there was a lag in the listening. And then we have the last territories being switched off just before Christmas next year. And then by 2018, you can say it's all digital apart from some small radio stations in the smaller communities. So really, that's it. It's moving forward. I'm not saying it's easy. It's quite hard, actually. It's noisy, but it's working. So that's it. Thank you for your attention. And in the end, thank you for lending me your slopes. If you do a conference in Zermatt next year, I'll definitely be there. Thank you.